Hello Internet, I'm Zahn, and welcome back to another drawing commentary video. Now, it's been a fairly long time since I've done a drawing commentary video on the channel, just by nature of the upload schedule and the things I've been posting. I feel like the art section of my channel has been tapering off a little bit, so I'd like to start moving back towards incorporating more of the drawing and design type videos in addition to just the Let's Play stuff. Because the Let's Play footage and episodes are a little bit easier to edit in large chunks, that results in me having a lot more of those on hand than doing the drawing challenge videos or drawing commentary videos, since they require a bit more editing and they take more time. But as a way to return back to the art focus, what I thought would be interesting to do on this video would be something I've seen other artists and other channels do, and that's a random shape drawing challenge. And if you've followed other artists who upload content on YouTube, what that basically means is they'll take a random shape, either something they draw or through a randomizer, and they have to create some sort of drawing or art piece based on said shape. And I want to sort of attempt to do that using my own design style. We're working here in Rhino 3D. If you're new to the drawing commentary series, that's the program I do my two-dimensional designs in. And this is going to be sort of a combination of experimental free drawing as well as operating within the constraints of the challenge itself. So to sort of set the ground rules, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a series of designs based on random shapes, and I'm going to start by drawing the shape itself. So if we were to go to our closed curve command, just as an example, I have to create a closed curve shape using however many points, and if we were to move forward with the challenge, this shape here would be what I have to create a design based on. And the ground rules I'm setting in place for this challenge are: 1, the original shape has to be recognizable in some form. I'm going to allow myself to rotate or do transformation commands, but I can't take the original shape and alter it so much that you can't find it in the design final piece. That's rule number 1. Rule number 2 is the main transformation command that I use on one design can't be used in creating the design that comes after it. And what I mean by that is the basic commands that I use, things like drawing lines, drawing shapes, the trim command, which I use to cut things apart, that's not what I'm talking about. The major transformation commands would be things like mirror, where I take the shape and I flip it over an axis to make it symmetrical, either horizontally or vertically. That's one major command that I'm setting as a ground rule here. Another one would be the polar array. That's a command I use very frequently for shapes that have a lot of copied sections. So if I array it around a central point, let's say 6 times, that would be the use of the polar array command. And based on the commands I frequently use, I think those are the main 2. So what I'm doing is I'm going to try and do 3, and we'll see how long that takes. Between the 3 drawings, I won't be able to duplicate those major commands more than once. And if I think of another type of transformation command that I want to apply that rule to as we go, then I will sort of add that to the list. But I'm thinking if I do 3 designs and I do the transformation commands on 2 of them and then 1 without, then that should satisfy the rules of the challenge. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to work on one main file here. I will draw the random shape, and then I'll copy it off to the side, and I'll keep it as a reference, so when I edit this footage together, I can overlay the original shape that I'm supposed to be using for this challenge and then I'll have it on hand for reference. That should make things a little bit easier. And I'll try and create the shapes in a unique way. I won't just use the closed curve. Maybe I'll use an angular geometric polyline for one. Maybe I will put a bunch of shapes together for another one. Well, we'll go ahead and get started with the first one. Like I've done in previous videos, I am using my quiet mouse. You'll be able to hear it if I slide it around on my mouse pad too much, but the buttons are very silent, so the overall clicking should be barely audible, and I'll try and cut it out where I can if I think it's going to be distracting. But we'll go ahead and start the first shape. I will turn grid snap off, and I will close my eyes and draw a random shape, and then once I'm done, I'll close it off so that it's a completely closed curve. So let's see, I'm just going to hit a bunch of points. Hopefully none of them are intersecting. Okay. And then we'll join it up over here. This is our first shape that we'll use. And like I said a second ago, I copy it over here. I think what I may end up doing is having all the designs on one large canvas. Maybe I will shrink the scale down that way we're not taking quite as much real estate on here. But this will be our first shape that we need to work with. And overall, this is sort of a weird blob-like shape. I think what I'll start doing before I figure out which transformation commands I want to use, I'm going to start by just adding in some shapes in detail to this thing and see what sort of emerges. Again, our ground rules state that we can't take this shape and alter it too much so that it's unrecognizable, but we can do things like add shapes on the inside, we can add texturing and detail, and add things to the exterior. If I wanted to, let's say, add a thing over here, I could do that. I'm going to allow that as part of the rules, as long as I don't do things like alter this and change the shape. And we'll see by the end if I've satisfied all the criteria of the challenge, because we'll have the original over here that we can compare. And if it looks like it's too far off, then maybe we will rule that as a failure for the drawing challenge. But overall, I think I want to go the and how we do that, let's see. I could cut out a section that would look like a mouth over here, but that would sort of obscure this intersection of the original shape. Rather than do that, what if we made this the mouth over here? Let's start by adding in some teeth. And we'll flip this around and rotate it into place. This one might not actually need any of the transformation commands if we're using this as just a sort of creature design, but I can add some more detail on the outside and we'll sort of see where it goes. Could be a sort of slime type creature, which I've been drawing a lot of lately on stream. But we'll go ahead and take the teeth, trim out the sections, and start working with what appears to be this thing's face. One thing I wanted to talk a little bit about, I was debating whether or not to do a separate video series or just work it into the next actual drawing commentary that I did. And that's talking specifically about the version of Rhino 3D that I'm currently using. I'd have to go back and look at the upload history for the channel and see, but I'm pretty sure the last time I did a Rhino drawing commentary video was a while ago, and I think it was on my old PC build. And like I've mentioned, I think I posted some stuff about it on Twitter, and I mentioned it in some other videos, probably for the sprite drawing, which I have done a little bit of since rebuilding my PC. But the version of Rhino that I'm using now is Rhino version 6. And the one I was using, I believe, was 4. Using an old student license that I had, I was using Rhino 4 and basically used that forever until it became very apparent that I was no longer going to be able to do so with my operating system having to be upgraded. And as a result, I spent some money on an actual commercial license. Fortunately, I'd have to buy one from scratch. I was able to upgrade my student license, and I was able to get the retail version of Rhino 6, and it was much cheaper than buying the standalone commercial license from scratch, which would have been about $1,000. I ended up paying, I think the upgrade was still several $100s, something like that, maybe around 4 or 5. Still quite expensive for software, but the point is I didn't have to spend $1,000 on the software license itself. And now that I own it, with an upgraded version, I can upgrade my Rhino forever, and I own it, and I never have to spend any more money on the software again. And that's kind of the point. I understand for a lot of people spending that much money on software is a lot, but I see it sort of as a business expense. One, because I use this program all the time. It's one of my main tools for creating art, and I use for my main projects. And two, I've been using the free one for, well, I would say well over a decade, I want to say, and I definitely get my money's worth out of the program itself. So even though it's a bit of an expense, I see it more as an investment and something I thankfully won't have to do again. But in case I haven't talked about it in any other videos, which I'm pretty sure I haven't, the interface for Rhino 6 compared to Rhino 4 is a little bit different. Overall, the main window, the main UI is the same. You work in, we'll take a quick pause from the drawing here. The main UI looks the same, that you work in multiple windows. The standard ones have a front perspective, right perspective, top, and three-dimensional perspective if you were working on a 3D object. One thing that Rhino 6 moved to is a customizable toolbar layout and function kind of like ribbons. Taking a page from probably MS Office and other softwares, pieces like that, they basically made it so that you can customize your toolbar and set up like ribbons. The problem I ran into with that was that putting all the tools that I know and commands I normally use was making it really cumbersome and kind of hard to navigate. So what I ended up doing was setting up like floating toolbars, which you have the ability to do in the program itself. And rather than try and make a series of toolbars that would take up half the screen, I pulled out the ones I needed, and then I have them floating here, and they're overlaid below the command line up here. Because most of the stuff I do, pretty much all the stuff I do, uses two-dimensional commands and some surface commands, just creating these as floating objects here was good enough, and it ended up being fine for the UI the way I use it. Another thing that I'll talk about once we get to the rendering phase is the material assignment and the way to assign color. That was a little bit of a new thing I had to learn and figure out as we were going. When we get to that point in the design, I will take a minute to explain what that looks like and what it means in this version of the software. If you've been following the design work videos on my channel or the tutorials for Rhino I've done in the past, that function when it comes to rendering surfaces and assigning color is going to be different in this current version of the program. And if anyone is out there giving it a try. I think it'll be good to clarify what's different and how to navigate that, since I haven't talked about it on video before. If we go back to our design here, what we've sort of created as I've been talking, using our original shape, which if we do a check against our reference, we pull it over, I'll scale it down to sort of match the size as close as possible. The original shape is still preserved in there. By not cutting apart the mouth section and separating it, I think we've still fulfilled that requirement of the challenge. And as I've been drawing here, what this thing started to look like to me is a sort of eel-like creature. And I think I want to run with that idea as I build out the details here on the face. And work on creating some additional things that are going to lead to a body and actually flesh out the design. And what we can do is, let's see, I thought about adding in a sort of fin on the side here, but I think I'm going to put it out here and have the head sort of end at that point. That way we're not taking out the original reference and the shape will remain intact. Going back to the topic of switching to a new version of the Rhino software, overall it was not really a big adjustment. I had to sort of deal with a couple new features, like the thing with curves that you could probably see in the footage here. When I draw a curve and then I put it down on the surface, one feature that 6 has that 4 didn't is if I click on it, it assigns the control points automatically to either an open or closed curve just by selecting it. In the past, when you had a curve and you want to manipulate it in some fashion with the control points, after putting it down, you'd have to select it, and then you have to hit Show Object Control Points. You could still do that manually, but with the version of the software in 6, now all you have to do is click on it and it gives you those control points, and you can do things like stretch and pull and manipulate the curve to your liking without having to use a separate command in order to do so. The problem that I've run into is, because that happens, and for, let's say we join all of these into one closed curve section, if we make this one solid curve and we select it, it gives you all the control points, but let's say I select it and I select a couple points without even paying attention. I want to move this somewhere else. If I try and just pull this thing over, it's going to try and manipulate the points that I've selected. And so it gets a little bit confusing when you're trying to select multiple things and like drag them into place, but you've selected the points and it's pulling the curve instead of just pulling the whole shape. And the way I've gotten around that is just by getting a habit of selecting the sections I want to move and not drag selecting, since that will select the manipulation points instead. It's just a little bit of a change in habit. I do think it's better that the control points just automatically turn on when you select something. That way I don't have to click the command for it. It just requires a little bit more paying attention to what you're doing so that you're not dragging things all over the place when you don't mean to. Moving on with the creature design that we've got here, I think I'm going to shrink this one down again. That way we're not taking up too much space. The scaling will be fine. I'm not terribly worried about how much space the thing takes up. I just want to not crowd the canvas since we're going to be doing more than one of these. Now we could start looking at a body. If we're sort of running in line with the idea of an eel, I'm thinking a long body that follows a sort of set curve. And what we could do, just had an idea. We could do something that I have experimented with before when it comes to large shapes. And this could be our transformation command limitation here. We could use the original shape for our reference and use it to create the body segments. And let's give ourselves some space to work here. We'll move the main piece up a little bit while we deal with this. We take the original shape, we rotated it, give us an easier part to work with. But I don't think that's going to go against the rules of the challenge because the main shape in its unaltered form is up here. This is going to sort of be an additional component that we're going to sort of work to our advantage here. And I won't worry too much about preserving the shape, the original shape, but we'll use it in order to create the body segments of our aquatic creature. Let's see. We'll take that and cut out a section here. Point of this is to create some segments that we're going to copy around. We're not going to use any of the major array transformation tools, but we are going to use a combination of copy and bend. So I guess the transformation command for this one is going to be the bend feature as a primary way of creating the shape that we want. And in addition to just these connecting sections, we'll go ahead and add some detail to the parts that we're going to copy. This is in line with the way I've done a lot of the tails and sort of extended sections on some of the designs I've created in the past. It tends to work a little bit easier if I create the design and then bend it into the shape I want versus just using the array along curve command, which can be a little bit hard to predict at times. That command, which I've explained in the past, uses the array function to copy something along a path curve, and it'll auto-rotate things into place depending on how many sections you tell it to build. Problem is, I guess I can demonstrate real quick here. If we create a path curve, like so, and then we create a shape that we want to copy along said path curve, and we go up to Transform, Array, Along Curve, select Objects, right-click, select Path Curve, and then let's say we wanted to do 12 items in total. What it does is it copies our original circle along the path curve 12 times, and it automatically rotates it along the path curve to put them in place. And because 12 of them was a little bit more than it could fit in on the curve, you have one floating out here by itself. But this particular command can be useful as long as the path curve doesn't get really wonky. Sometimes when I've done it, I've tried to put stuff in place, but because I'm copying things that are irregularly shaped, it confuses the software and it doesn't really put things into place in a fashion that I like. So rather than do that, I found it a little bit more consistent to just use the copy and bend function when it comes to things like tails or long tendril type segments. And what we can do, we can scale this up a little. Maybe it's a little too big. I may have to shrink the head down. But if we copy this out like so, eyeballing it to keep the distance relatively equal, then we take our copied sections, we move it out again, and we do this. I will move this down here and then make a copy so that I have the original reference. Let's try and take this series of body segments and bend it into place to create the body of our creature here. And right away I could tell these things scaled up a little bit too large. We will sort of eyeball where we want it to start, and this is going to be interesting to see. Using the bend command, and I'm going to try and get as close as possible to the path curve that we created. Obviously, because this one is scaled up a little bit larger than we probably would have estimated, it's gonna be a bit more difficult to get all the bends in there, but I think if we wanted to, we could even copy around some additional sections and give it some more twists. Like so. Let's grab the connecting section as well. And then we'll fit it into place. And then see if we can bend it around a little bit more. Let's see. Or we could bend it around, have it wrapping around this way. That'll probably give it a better shape. Let's see what that looks like. Yeah, I think the sections are going to get a little bit hard to bend. But we could do this. Because we have our original ones down here. We could copy this over. We're going to need to rotate it around to follow the angle that everything's twisting at. But if we rotate it into place here, and now we try and bend it, then now we sort of have an easier time taking everything and positioning it in place. And we'll take the path curve out. And I think that'll work a little bit better. That way this design isn't getting too tall. And we can cap off the tail here with a shape and then fill in the detail here.